And today we've got all three presenters with us, Dr. Kurt Smith, Renee Wyatt, and Dr. Becky Smith. I'm now just going to pass it over to Kurt to get us started for the day.
All right. Thank you, Roseanne. This is Kurt Smith, professor of forestry at North Carolina State University. And we're going to be covering road mapping, goals and succession, who, when, and how to transfer today. This is module 4 of 5. So we are getting close to completing it. I think Wednesday is our final piece of presentation. So let me see. I'm having a little trouble getting control of the slides. Okay, I'm back. Just a lot of this sort of preamble stuff that I think you all are getting too familiar with seeing, but obviously I'm Kurt Smith. I'm from North Carolina State University. We have Renee Wyatt from Purdue and Becky Smith, no relation, from Mississippi State. She's actually coming to us from the airport today. If you hear any strange background rumblings or sounds, also partnering with us is SRDC, I believe. Roseanne works for them, and the North Central Regional Center for Rural Development, as well as the Institute for Family Business. So our purpose today is just to continue on and how to roadmap and set goals in succession. Succession planning is really sort of that soft science, the soft part maybe of estate planning, where you deal with some of the emotional and financial aspects of sort of weaving together a family and business, making decisions, moving forward, whatever that looks like for you. And so we do have a research-based curriculum. We have a lot of handouts that are being loaded up in the chat as we move forward from Roseanne. So we've covered a lot of soft skills. And I think yesterday we covered maybe some of the harder skills with the hopes that you all will dig, as educators, you all will dig a little deeper into some of those. Already talked about the authors here, so we'll press forward. Obviously, none of what we do is legal advice or financial advice, so we're educators first and foremost. So I think our underlying goal in this entire series is to drive you to go see a professional, rather than sort of take some nuanced answer from a nuanced scenario and run with it too far. So this is just a general slide. I'd actually be interested. This slide we just throw up sort of experientially about what we have experienced doing workshops live, but you might even want to throw up in the chat group any things that you do to keep your workshops on track and keep them from getting derailed, I guess. I'd be curious to see what some of you guys recommend out there that do a lot of workshops. So obviously we do icebreakers. We're not going to do those now, but be curious if you have any good icebreakers. I think all of us are looking for some new ones. Definitional stuff as we get started. Successional planning, we're referring to that transfer of management. Estate planning, we're talking about once the owner's life is over, transferring those personal assets. Successor, we're talking about the person who will manage and own the business, either while you're alive and no longer in the business or dead. And the incumbent, the person that sort of got the car keys, is driving the train, and makes the decisions about passing on ownership and/or business interest. Businesses, we're talking about anything farm, forest, your LLC, your sole proprietorship. And when we refer to land, we're talking about everything: vacant land, bare land, farmland, et cetera, et cetera. So that's just a little bit of definitional stuff. And we're going to be looking today at both the purpose of road mapping and goal setting. We're going to talk about ways that you can set goals. We're going to talk about vision and mission, and how do we plan to transfer management and ownership. And finally, road mapping your succession process. So with that, I think, Becky, you probably are taking control for a few slides here.
I have the ball. Thank you, Kurt. Great to be with everybody on this Monday afternoon. Again, as Kurt said, I'm at the airport, so I apologize about the background noise. We're going to talk about setting goals. Can everybody just say something about setting goals? I was kind of wondering what your relationship is with goal setting. And we talk about goals a lot and they're really, really important. I think it can get tiring though, a little bit of, um, fatigue around goal setting. So I was just wondering, where are you today with your goals as we're kind of coming into the end of the year? All right, in this dimension of succession planning, right now we're going to talk about goals of the firm and how to have communication around them. And just a little bit later, we're going to talk about its goals, is narrowing it down as far as succession itself. So thank you, Beth. Setting goals is easy. It's the following through that's the hard part. Absolutely. Right. So a lot of times I work with financial education. So I work with goals with people a lot. And a lot of times people, we don't have any, and we're just sort of going out there and meandering, and so we don't have a direction. And so once we have that conversation and we sit down and we talk about our values and we talk about goals related to them, then that gives us a flag where we can go. And as Beth said, like, it doesn't always turn out, but sometimes the obstacles are there and we just have to run up the flagpole again. Lucy does, thanks for sharing, does not enjoy the goal setting. That can be, can be tough. So a lot of baggage with goals, but they really do serve a really good purpose. We set our flag, it gives us some place to focus on an intention. And when we can have those aligned with the values, we're much closer to getting that, right? So when we factor in our the obstacles that are likely to occur, that also helps us. So this curriculum and the worksheets that exist around this topic are going to help bridge that communication, that's going to be able to bring up lots of scenarios, and so that the dialogue can be rich and help make progress. So that's really, to be able to make progress is really, really important for us to be able to reach our goals. So we've got some tools here for you. So goals can be financial, they can be not financial. So when we're talking about a business, we're people are in business to do different things, right? So being clear about what is your purpose and your vision for the business is something that will really help if you can get clear on that. And the others around you can get clear on that, and then you can talk about it and know where the people that you are working with are coming from, and then how to bridge those gaps, right? So discussing goals is going to take time. Sometimes we just assume everybody else is on the same page that we are, and that's not always the case. So just taking time to slow down and have a conversation that you may not even think is worth the time may actually save you a lot of time and make you, whatever it is, help you reach your goal down the road. So so family members often do have a different reason and a different why that they're involved. So looking for consensus is good. Setting goals related to the succession planning is also important. We're going to cover that before. Third is going to take.
All right. Oh, sorry. I'm going to jump back in on this section for a few slides. We're going to talk a little bit about vision and mission. And so with that, values affect the vision for your land or business. So what are values? Values are those things that you consider to be important. And in order to translate those things into a vision and business structure, you have to be able to know what they are. So we're going to talk about that. Moving it to a vision. Vision sounds a little whifty. I think somebody put in the chat it's kind of a hard thing to do. I think of I could have the book of the Bible. There's a verse in the Bible about without a vision the people perish. There is something about human beings that need to have a picture to follow. And vision sort of falls in that. If any of you have ever been involved in sports, a regular feature of sports after all the training and practice is to visualize, whether it's on the field or it's a track event or whatever. You visualize yourself into success. You picture it in your brain so you know exactly how it's going to play out. And of course, all these things, values and vision, ultimately are heading you to create a strategy, or maybe I could say milestones or steps to get what you want to do. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about for just a few slides. So vision, where do you want your business to go? And everybody has a little different take on that. As we've said in prior presentations, some people are on the hunt for money and investments. Some people have a vision of their kids and grandkids and legacy. Some people have a strong environmental ethic and they just want to leave their business or land functioning in a super ethical way. So your vision will inform your mission, and the mission ultimately will be those steps that you're going to take to achieve that business vision. So you will see some worksheets in which you can kind of practice and tease this out a little bit for yourself further into the presentation. But yeah, I mean, just to have a vision, there may be 100 little steps involved in there in order to sort of walk in the right direction and wind up in the right place. So developing a vision, you really want to have a description of what or where your business should look like and what it should be like some years from now. And that actually takes a little doing. Perhaps some owners that are a little longer in the tooth have that more well developed because they've kind of teased it out and thought about it through the years. But it provides a context for managing the changes that are going to be necessary to get to those goals. That could be grooming or training a successor. That could be eliminating people as potential successors over a number of years. It could be diversifying your business or changing what you want to do. So it's ultimately, this vision is going to provide you with direction for developing strategy, looking for opportunities and how you're going to allocate your resources. Probably the chief one among that, your attention and your time. These kinds of things, you really want them. It's a little dangerous to say creative vision because some people really run with that. I know that from the work world. So you do want your visions to be really rooted in reality, but yet still a little bit of a reach or a little bit focused on the future in ways that you can't quite see clearly yet. So developing your vision, again, and we have worksheets that kind of help you tease this out for your stakeholders or clients if you're leading a workshop. Sometimes this works very nicely in small groups, a table of 5 or 6, where people can kind of bounce off each other in rather small group. What do you want this whole activity to look like in 10 years, 15 years, even over the next year to sort of get things rolling? What new activities might you be pursuing? Other questions might be, what are we actually good at? And what would make our business unique? So a lot of places, businesses, both farm and forest, they kind of morph into some sort of niche that they haven't really uncovered yet. Something they know will work in their community and something they have skills at. What will be the roles of family members? Or maybe there are no roles for your family member. That's something a lot of people don't like to think about, but often that can be the case as well. In which case you're starting to look for a manager or a star employee that has real interest in your business and your vision for the business. How does succession fit into your vision? And lastly, how do we envision it for our family? So that could be a lot of things too, from basically liquidating your interest in the business and giving shares and income to your family to not giving anything to your family. That doesn't happen too much, but at any rate, those are options to think about. So mission, what is mission? I'm not past my slide count, I hope. You guys stop me if I get too far, but mission will be the steps you'll take to achieve the vision for your land or business. So this is that series of 10, 15, 20 steps. They're going to walk you towards that goal. So it can be small things starting out in year 1, from family meetings to articulating your resources, all that kind of stuff. And it can get all the way down to the end where things can be very specific, but it's a series of steps. So that's something to think about. Most mission statements often begin with a to or an action verb. I would just throw in do what's comfortable for you and kind of work from that as well. So there are some worksheets. This is one that helps you assess, kind of work through brainstorming your goals. Helps you complete a rough draft of some of the succession goals, both long and short term. Helps you kind of write out and articulate a vision and a mission for your business or practice or farm or whatever it would be. And again, here's another one. I think probably most of you have figured out a lot of this is an amalgamation of handouts and sheets and materials that Renee and I have produced. But they're basically doing very similar things. And there are, no doubt 10 or 20 other versions out there you could look at. So you can look for one that you're comfortable with. But this form will also assist you in thinking through your goals. It'll help you think about putting time around your goals, making sure that you have goals that are attainable, and then some sort of mechanism to keep you accountable for progress, which I think is extremely important. So that's a bit about vision and goals. So I think we're probably on to the next section, which means I think we might be on to Renee.
Yep. Thanks, Kurt.
You're welcome.
So we're going to talk a little bit more about, we talked about goals and how we kind of set that up. But next we're going to talk about how do we actually plan for the transfer of management and ownership. Now, these don't always go at the same pace. A lot of times we see management go before ownership. Sometimes ownership can go first and then, the next generation can slowly start to manage. It just depends on what works for your farm or family business. But we're going to just talk a little bit more about, how do we even plan for those things? I know a lot of times people ask us, well, what's a checklist for succession? Like, just give me a checklist and I can do that. I can work off of a checklist, right? But really, succession is so individualized to each farm, family, business, whatever you're talking about, your land. It's really hard to just give you a checklist. We can give you some tips for developing, each of these stages. So that's what we're going to go into now. So one thing I wanted to share with you is just how to develop a management succession plan in general. Before we start, though, you want to make it clear that not all of your kids have to join the family business or join in, right? There's going to be, if you have multiple kids, even if you have one kid, they may or may not be interested. So make it clear they're not required to join by any means. And sometimes there's not a successor in your family. So don't make that assumption. If it's not a good fit, it's not a good fit. If there's somebody, if there's a kid down the road that works for you and is very interested, they might be a better fit, and that's okay. We always encourage, before you go through the succession process, to try to have that younger generation, work outside the family business first before they come back and just start working, right? It gives them perspective. Sometimes it gives them an appreciation for what they have, which is sometimes our goal. But make sure you give them those opportunities before they come back. So when we think about developing a management succession plan, the first step is to select the successor. And we put it just, 3 words, seems so simple. If you've gone through this, it's not simple. That's not oh, check, we got it. It's not like that, unfortunately. And this could be multiple successors. It could be that, some cousins are going to take over, maybe a brother and sister are taking over. There's a lot of different ways we can do this. Maybe there's just one successor and it's the heir apparent and it makes it easy, but it just depends. So that's step 1. Step 2 is to create a survival kit for the successor. This can be a lot of different things depending on your business and your land structure. You want that successor to be very comfortable in knowing, what farms you service, where all the land is, who are the people who are the advisors and the people that you talk to, whether it's FSA, whether it's insurance, all of these different people. You need to put all that in a survival kit so they have a handy tool to pull up and say, okay, this is where I'm going to go next. Step 3 is to groom the successor. So bring them into that business, help them to understand what's going on, what happens, help them to start making decisions. Since we are talking about management, we're talking about handing over the decision making of that business or that property. So make sure that you guide them and become a consultant and really help mentor them through that process. Step 4, you really need to promote an environment of trust and respect from both ends. We talked a lot about goals. Goals need to be met on both sides, right? We need to think about the incumbent's goals as well as the successor's goals. And then step 5 is to really cope with the financial realities of estate and gift tax. And that kind of tees us up for going into that ownership step, right? So we need to be thinking about that when we're going through this process. When we think about timing, we get asked this question a lot too. How long should it take? How long does it take to transfer a business or transfer a farm? And it really depends. But there's a lot of things that we need to consider. And if selling the business is, what works out for you, whether you sell it to family, whether you sell it to an outsider, you sell it to, your neighbor, you really want to think as the incumbent on whether or not you want to continue your involvement in the business if the new owner asks you to stay on. There's some cases where that new owner will buy in and take over management, but they want that other person to stay on to help them, help mentor them through that process. And if you do decide to stay on during the transition, you really have to think about how involved you want to be, especially if the new owner makes a lot of different changes from how you ran the business, right? So if that new owner comes in and does things completely different, do you, as the past owner, want to be on there and see all that? Are you mentally prepared to do that or not? It depends, person to person. It really depends on what you're able to do. So you can also think, if you are selling the business, how much does the business need to sell for you to earn a comparable income when you think about retirement? So sometimes farmers hold on to their land and continue to capture that cash rent every year to help fund their retirement. Other times we've seen them, sell that tract or a couple tracts off to fund their retirement. So they get kind of a lump sum to help them through that process. But you have to think about, what can you sell it for? Is there going to be a family discount if it's family that's buying it? We've done research on, discounts that successors assume they should have if they're buying from family. And, the discount that they assume they should get is like 70 or 80% off. So, it could be a long conversation about, what the actual value in that business is. And then lastly, you really have to think about the financial terms or conditions, whether the new owners get an outside loan, whether you're doing a contract sale, all of those things. And then what financial terms or conditions do you deem really unacceptable that you can't accept no matter what? So we have a handout. So this handout helps you to really think about your retirement and think about what kind of income you'll need in the future. It's important to really think about this and kind of map it out. I know that when we have beginning farmers trying to join a business, we have them map out their family living expenses. And that's really eye-opening to a lot of people on what you actually spend. I mean, most people kind of know in general what they make, right? And you probably have an idea of what's in your bank account, but knowing that back and forth and how things level out is really, really interesting. So this is a great form, and it helps you really focus on your retirement and also on your long care needs. And so depending on your goals, depending on what you do with your business, whether you sell it, whether you keep it, if you're going to continue, it can really change things. But this form really helps you to go through those things and have something written down. So take stock and look and see what you actually have to work with. And I think with that, I'm handing it back over to Becky.
All right. Thank you, Renee. There was a lot in that. So really good, important points there. We are going to walk through road mapping your succession process. What does all that mean? So what's a succession roadmap? And so basically it's going to help the families set their goals and track their progress. And be able to have these conversations and be able to take stabs at answering them and beginning the process of being able to get those answers. So,
I
who
don't
is,
know. Maybe there's a 30 minute.
sorry, Candace, I keep muting,
No,
unmuting,
maybe I
muting.
look for.
Anyway, I don't think she knows what's going on. All right, but who's going to be responsible? What the incumbent and successor are responsible for, respectively. When the responsibilities are transferred, on the way to transfer or full control. So the idea of succession is very big, but there are some nitty gritty details that need to be worked out, as Renee was just highlighting. And some of the pitfalls can be a really long time frame. So I want to be careful about too long of a time frame. We humans like certainty. We do not really thrive in uncertainty, and the longer the time frame gives more uncertainty, right? So want to be careful about that. One thing also to be careful about is if the successor isn't an owner, but is managing, and the business grows in value, and then all of a sudden, then that successor has a company that they have to pay more for, then that can feel like they've really been shot in the foot for their efforts. So these are things just to be thinking about that we've seen in the past, can be hurdles and bring up really situations you want to avoid. So road mapping can help think ahead and be able to prevent some of these outcomes that we would like to stay away from. So we have to be flexible, right? Adapting is the key to longevity, key to relationships, right? Healthy relationships with ourselves and with others. So the roles and the hats that we'll wear will change, but also in self-understanding, right? So the incumbent transitions from leader to chief to maybe taking on a consultant role. That takes a different skill, right? And then successors transition from having no role to being that leader in chief. And again, that's a different skill set. So oftentimes the incumbent initiates the transition process, and they have to build those skills. So, we have another worksheet, successor and organizational assessment. So again, we have this idea of succession and we've broken it down for you into different steps. But even further down, there are the details. And so this worksheet is going to help you think about and be able to dialogue with potential successors, and so that you can make progress. So we're not stopping and like passing out these worksheets for you, but there's a whole trove of treasures for you. So Kurt, I think this is you, or maybe it's Renee. Maybe it's me. Okay. Governance, transition. So what is going to be transition? So governance will be moving, right? Functional responsibilities, other things like dividends. So multiple dimensions are going to need to be transitioned. Renee, I know this is you.
Yep, this one's me. Thanks, Becky. So there's a couple of different quadrants that we're going to look at next. And I've used these a lot when I work with farm and family businesses, just to think about where the incumbent generation falls. It can be really easy for them to say, yeah, I'm going to retire in 10 years. But, when you actually get down to the nitty gritty and ask them where they are mentally and financially as far as readiness to leave the business, they can really get kind of shocked, and it can be shocking for others too. So we like to use this quadrant and have people indicate, how mentally and financially well off people are and ready to go. So those who aren't mentally or financially ready to go, they're in that stay and grow phase. So they're really trying to grow the firm, improve efficiencies. They could be wanting to bring in a financial partner. There's a lot of reasons some people are in that stay and grow phase. Sometimes it's because they're in their 30s to even early 60s, and they're just not in the phase of life where they're ready to go financially or mentally, right? They're still growing the business. But ideally, when we do get to that transition spot, when we're starting to really implement succession, ideally we want people in that rich and ready to go phase up there in the upper right quadrant. And people who are rich and ready to go are both mentally and financially ready. A lot of times they're able to gift the business or the farm to the next generation. Sometimes they sell it. But these other two quarters of the quadrant, I guess. So we have well off but chooses to work. I run into that a lot when I'm consulting farmers. There's a lot of them, if you could think of the phrase, I'm going to die in my tractor. Those would be the people probably who are well off but choose to work, right? They just don't want to quit working. They just love it, right? It's their legacy, it's their livelihood, it's basically everything to them, it's their identity. And so for whatever reason, they're just not mentally ready to go. There are some people who are also, they're very mentally ready to go, but financially they aren't quite ready. And so for those people, they're going to have to sell the business at the highest price possible to fund either their next venture or retirement or whatever that looks like. And then on the other side, we have a quadrant for successor considerations. So when we're looking at the willingness and ability of the successor, we have both of those to think about, right? Their ability as far as, the particular job profile that they're looking at. And then we have willingness. So their degree of effective commitment to the business and to the family farm. So we'll have a little bit of audience participation here, if you would. Which is more important, ability or willingness, when we think about successors joining the farm or joining the business? Which is more important, ability or willingness? Okay, somebody said willingness. We're getting lots of willingness. Somebody said ability. Willingness, ability. It's interesting. Yeah, I normally get combo, right? Ideally we'd have both. So it's interesting. It really depends on who I'm talking to as to the answers that I get here. When I talk to like corn and soybean farmers, they say we're worried about their willingness. We want them to be really committed to the farm. We can teach them the other things, right? If they need to go learn some more agronomic stuff, they can. If they need to go learn more about, mechanical things, they can go learn that. But we really want them to be committed. For whatever reason, when I talk to the Christmas tree growers in our state, they say ability. We want them to know what they're doing. We can motivate them. And I always tell them I would love to know how they motivate those people, because if there's a successor and they don't want to join the business, I really don't know how you can make them want to join the business. But anyway, so similar to the quadrant that we looked at for the incumbents, we look at this for the successors. Ideally, we want successors who are interested and able. So they have the willingness and they have the ability to join the firm. So we basically define an entry path for them. For those who are not interested and not able, sometimes, those are the people that we're going to say, okay, if it's our son or daughter, we're not going to involve you in the business side. Maybe they get other assets if we're worried about that fair versus equal conversation, but maybe it's not the best fit. We help them find something else that they would like to do. If they're not interested, but they're able, really have to think about motivations, getting to the core of that person as to why they might want to join the farm, why they might want to take on that responsibility, and try, if you can, sometimes to have like a side business for them that really interests them. We've seen that happen quite a bit. If they're interested but not able, that's where training comes in. We have to clarify expectations, maybe adapt that job description for them a little bit, and try to see what you can do to make it a good fit for them. So we have this handout that we like to use, and we have 2 sets of each quadrants. So we like to map where the incumbents are now, where the successors are now, and then think about, 5, 10, 15, whatever that timeline looks like, however many years in the future, to see where you hope that they move within that quadrant. So Roseanne, I'm sure drop that in the chat here in just a minute. It's a really great handout, and it's really eye-opening to kind of think about how other people see the versus how they see themselves. Same with the successor. So it's always good to compare those results that you get. So we've talked a lot about goals today. But when we think about the goals of the incumbent and the successor, oftentimes incumbents try to find a fit between their own values and the characteristics of the successor, right? We like to be around people that are like us. And so they go after that, right? When they're choosing a successor sometimes. But really throughout these processes that we've talked about, and you probably heard us say this in other modules as well, but the incumbent and the successor are so dependent on each other through the succession process. They need to make sure they acknowledge each other's goals and concerns. They make the goals, considerations, and fears from both sides clear and explicit. And if understanding is really lacking, it can be really, really hard to make this work. So we really have to acknowledge each other's fears, goals, considerations, make sure that we're on the same page to try to help move forward in a mindful and thoughtful way, in a positive way. So this comes to that question of, how long does it take to transfer? This was some research done over about a 10-year time span, looking at, how long it takes to transfer from the start of initial discussion to the handover of management and ownership. And so if we're thinking about in the family, and it's going to be somebody in the family that takes over, it takes about 6.5 years. If we think about transferring to employees, so keeping the business intact, just transferring it to someone where they're probably buying it from someone outside of the business, outside of the family, sorry. It takes about 3.3 years. And then if they're like selling the business, liquidating it, it takes about 1.6 years. So succession takes a really, really long time, even when we're selling everything, 1.6 years on average. So that's a long time. That's why we really encourage people to, plan early, plan often, start those discussions before you even think you need to. So now that we know kind of our time frame and how long it takes, it'll make sense why we're out here to year T+6. But this is the roadmap. When you look at it right off the bat, I'm going to be honest, when I looked at it, I was like, whoa, that's a lot. I don't know if I'll use this. But as I've used it a couple times myself, and then also with a lot of farm families, it is a really, really useful tool that's highly adaptable to different situations. And so what we see here is we see the age of the incumbent and the successor. Side note, if you do want one with multiple successors or in Excel where you can add and edit all those things, I can send that to you. Just send me an email. But we have the age of both the incumbent and the successor at year T, which could be today, and then year T+6. So 6 years down the road, right? What does that look like? As Becky talked about earlier, this has the components of governance transition, transition of functional responsibilities, and also those miscellaneous things, right? In this scenario, it's dividends, but it could be a lot of things. In terms of transition of miscellaneous things, we've had grain bins thrown in there. We've had this tractor and then, this hay wagon thrown in there separately, right? You can really map out each person's expectations and what they want through this process. And it also helps, to think about when people are actually planning on transitioning different functional responsibilities. In here, we have, human resource, business strategy, and marketing. It could be, bookkeeping, meeting with advisors, conducting the board meeting. It could be all of these different things. So you can really use this. And as we see too, when we look at that board management piece towards the middle and that ownership percentage, we can see where the incumbent, the incumbent starts out at 100, where they're the sole owner, and they're also the CEO, where the successor has 0% ownership and they're the manager. And we can really see as time goes on, the incumbent goes down, 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 down in ownership percentage, and the successor goes up, 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 up. Same way when we think about actually managing that effective business. The incumbent goes from CEO, and then eventually they go to advisor, right? They step back and they're in that consulting role versus making all of the decisions. A lot of farmers say, well, the ownership won't transition until I die. That's fine. You can just put, T plus grandma and grandpa pass away, right? You can put whatever you want in here. You don't have to do every single portion of this, but this is a tool that you can really use to help map out what everybody's thinking and where things will fall. So this is a look at the blank roadmap activity. This is in your handouts. I'm happy to discuss this with you. It's a really, really great tool. If not even for people to go with their families and say, when do you think this portion should start transitioning, and when would your goal to be for it to be a finished transitioning on certain responsibilities or miscellaneous things that you have in there. So I really encourage you to try to use that tool, go through it, see what questions you have. If you have questions or hangups, let me know. As you can see in these scenarios, we have a single successor scenario on the left, and then a multiple successor scenario on the right. So it's easily adaptable to each situation. You can add blanks in there for functional responsibilities. And I'm happy, even if you're across the US and not close to Indiana, I'm happy to jump on a Zoom call and work you through it. I'm happy to do that. So another handout that we have, maybe you say, you know what, the roadmap is a little bit too in the weeds for me. We're not ready for that. I want something more general to think about, just some steps and timelines for succession. This is a really great handout for that. So it goes through your succession plan timeline, and it really lays it out. In the next year, my goal is to do this. You can write something, right? In the next 2 years, my goal is to do this. And then it has some blanks too. Because if you say, our goal is really in the next 15 years to have everything transferred. So in the next 10 years, we want to have, X, Y, and Z done. So it really helps you to do that. So we've got multiple handouts for different things that you might want to be looking at. And so basically just choose the version that's right for you and right for the people that you're working with. And as always, let us know if you have any questions with that. So some tips I like to talk about when I'm talking to farmers or family businesses about just planning for succession. This sounds weird, right? Because succession is a planning process, but it's something that a lot of times people have to ramp themselves up for and really plan to start it. So first, start early. So you really want to start planning early for succession. Start at least considering your different options. If you're the owner, start thinking about what you desire as far as exit. Do you want to give it to your family? Do you want to sell it to your family? Do you want to sell it to somebody outside? And then think about, what that really looks like. We also encourage people to involve your family in those discussions. We're going to talk about meetings on our next meeting on Wednesday, but involve your family in those discussions so that they know what's going on in your head, and so that they know, when these plans do come out, so they understand what and why is happening, right? Next, be realistic. You've heard us say this a few times. If you don't have any heirs in your family, you don't have any heirs in your family, right? If you don't have any successors that are wanting to take over, that's okay, but you have to plan for that. They're not going to fall out of the sky. So we have to be realistic about what we have. Next, so don't assume. It's this fair versus equal talk is really, really difficult, but you have to get over the idea that everybody has to have equal shares. It doesn't always make sense, right? If you have one of your kids that's kind of wayward, they've had some issues with, whether it be financial, substances, whatever, maybe they've just had some issues. It might not be in the best interest for the rest of you to involve them in the actual business, right? So we have to really, really don't assume that everybody has to get a fair share. Next, make sure we train the successors and work with them. That's why we want to bring them in early. Start handing over pieces of that management as early as we can to help them have some buy-in and know what they're taking over. And then lastly, get outside help, right? Becky talked about the advisor piece, I think a couple modules ago. Think about who you need to help your business and bring them in, get their help, A lot of times you're going to have to pay for it, but pay for that help. It's going to really help you to have a good, solid plan in the end. It's well worth the money. And our last handout for today is strategies for succession. So this is a really good way to help you line out your ownership, management, governance. You look at current, like what's going on right now, transition, when, what, how should that transition, and then in the future, what you want it to look like. This is another one of those forms where it's great to hand it out to multiple people and kind of see where everybody lands and try to get some consensus. You might be surprised. So we hope that you use a lot of these different handouts, whether it's for your family or for the families that you help to guide.